Just hours ago, former President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty during a historic arraignment in a Miami federal courtroom. He is facing 37 criminal charges related to his handling of classified documents. Joining us now to help break down the day in court is legal expert and prosecutor Wendy Patrick. Wendy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Carlo.
You know, I want to start off with we knew a little bit of what was coming, but were there any surprises today in what you've read and heard?
Well, there's no surprise with respect to the charges. We've known what the charges are, 37 charges, everything from willful retention of national defense information to conspiracy to obstruct justice and several other charges. What was perhaps a surprise, maybe even to the prosecution, is the judge's suggestion that there be a ban on who the former president can discuss this case with between now and the time that this trial gets going, whenever that happens. And that was something that is probably standard in many courtrooms and apparently standard in this courtroom as well, in this jurisdiction. But what that means is that even the former president and his co-defendant, who he spends time with allegedly every day, cannot discuss the case. So that's a bit of a curveball, although, you know, many of us in the system aren't surprised at that kind of a restriction, because what you want to do is not only avoid witness tampering, but avoid any indication or any optics that that type of thing is going on. Other than that, Carlo, it was a pretty unremarkable hearing. Only a couple people got to see it, and now we go into the motion practice that's likely going to dominate the docket in the months to come.
You know, I want to talk about a lot, but I do want to follow up on something you said. Only a few people got to see it. There's been a lot of discussion. No cameras are being allowed, and no cameras are allowed in, I believe, all federal courts. With the stakes this high, with this case, how important is it for transparency for the country to have cameras in the courtroom for all of the procedures in this case?
Well, not important enough. And according to the ruling last night, that was exactly the motion that the judge ruled on, is should this be an exception? Should the court deviate from standard practice simply because this case is, as you mentioned, of such public interest? So there won't be cameras permitted in the courtroom. But remember, you know, the trial isn't going to take place for so long. You know, many are questioning whether there's enough runway for this trial to get off the ground before the election. And if that happens, I mean, think about what that could mean for former President Trump, now candidate Trump. Is he a candidate or a litigant? If this were to go to trial, he would be required to be in that courtroom in the hot seat without cameras. So what that would mean is he wouldn't be able to be on the campaign trail. So whether or not cameras would be allowed, this still wouldn't be something that would impact the election, because it's likely not going to take place until afterwards.
With the jeopardy of the case being interfered with an election, because I've read and heard discussion that while he can't stop the trial per se, he can stop the DOJ from pursuing the trial basically after he goes and can't pardon himself. Is there a real imperative that they get this trial done now? Can they?
Well, what's interesting, Carlo, is it was the special prosecutor that was moving for a speedy trial, that was basically saying, we want to get this thing moving. Normally, it's the defense that says justice delayed is justice denied, but the tables are turned here for a variety of reasons. But remember that speedy trial rights, you normally think about that as inuring to the benefit of the defendant. Here, the former president and his team would rather run out the clock. And one of the reasons, as you mentioned, is as it gets closer to the election, this case becomes more political than legal, at least in the court of public opinion. And who is a member of the court of public opinion? Potential jurors. Carlo, it's a good enough draw for the former president to be in a jurisdiction that is so friendly. Florida, he won Florida twice. But not only that, the court of public opinion is also going to be receptive, perhaps, to some of the pretrial arguments that you already hear the former president and his lawyers making.
Wendy, less than a minute left. You touched on it. What is the likelihood that prosecutors are going to find 12 people who are going to believe beyond a reasonable doubt the charges against Donald Trump? With all that we've seen, with all of the vitriol out there, all the attacks saying that this is a witch hunt, et cetera, and people seem to be buying that.
You know, I have the ultimate faith in the jury system. I believe that there are fair jurors that want to do the right thing, that can do the right thing, that will bend over backwards to set any kind of preconceived notion or prejudice aside. In a case like this, what we want to make sure is that we find jurors that are going to be fair to both sides. I believe we can do that, having been in the system for almost 30 years. It still is going to take a lot of strategy during jury selection, and that's why it'll be probably one of the biggest parts of the trial is finding those men and women that are able to serve.
Yeah, whoever serves on that panel, let's hope that they just rule on the law and the case in front of them. Wendy Patrick, our legal analyst, joining us on this historic day. Thank you so much for your time and for your insight.
Thank you.